Coming up today on the Nick Craig Show, a jury in Manhattan has found that Live Nation is an illegal monopoly and it holds that monopoly over live events. We'll have all the details coming up. And a good Thursday morning to you. Welcome into the Nick Craig Show, streaming live this morning on YouTube, Rumble, X, and Facebook. Don't forget that you can take the show with you 24/7 on demand in your favorite podcast app by simply searching for the Nick Craig Show. You can also listen online by visiting the website nickcraig.com. Our program this morning is brought to you by the Law Group here in Wilmington. Melissa Gott and her team. Visit them online, lawgroupnc.com, or give them a call, 910-251-6088. We'll hear more from them coming up as we roll through this busy Thursday edition of the Nick Craig Show. There was a bombshell decision by a jury in Manhattan yesterday as it relates to Live Nation and Ticketmaster. A jury in New York City has found that the concert giant known as Live Nation Entertainment and its subsidiary Ticketmaster have a harmful monopoly over big concert venues. This decision is dealing the company a major loss in a lawsuit that was brought by dozens of U.S. states and the District of Columbia, which did include here in North Carolina Attorney General Jeff Jackson, who brought the suit against Live Nation. And so we're going to get into the details of this jury verdict. They deliberated for, I think, 4 or 5 days on this in Manhattan where this was taking place. But I think it's important to take a little bit of a step back and for me, explain my personal gripes and frustrations with what goes on with Live Nation and Ticketmaster. Here across the state of North Carolina, you've got a couple of major venues that are operated by Live Nation and then, of course, its subsidiary, Ticketmaster. You've got Walnut Creek Park up in Raleigh, major venue there. In Charlotte, you've got formerly what was the PNC Music Pavilion. That is a venue that Live Nation operates. And in Wilmington, you have what is called Live Oak Bank Pavilion, which is right on the water in downtown Wilmington. And so for Live Nation, which that is the business that they are in of producing these live events, music performances, concerts across the United States. It's no surprise that some of the largest music venues here in North Carolina are operated by Live Nation. But there is an issue that starts to pop up with some of these events and some of these venues. For example, in Raleigh, Walnut Creek Park is owned by the city of Raleigh. In Wilmington, Live Oak Bank Pavilion is owned by the city of Wilmington. So you have taxpayer-funded, taxpayer-operated, and taxpayer-owned music venues like Walnut Creek, like Live Oak Bank in Wilmington, that Live Nation has essentially cannibalized. Now, to Live Nation's credit, the city of Raleigh and the city of Wilmington have agreed to let Live Nation operate these venues for their music performances, which makes sense, right? I don't know that, I don't, actually, let me restate that. I do know for a fact that I don't want a city government spending its time booking musical acts. I am not oblivious to that point. I'm not necessarily interested, and I do not think it is a good use of government resources and time for a city like Raleigh or Wilmington to become a concert promoter. I don't believe that is a good use of government. So that is not what I am bringing forth in any way, shape, or form. But it is important to note that these are taxpayer-owned venues. Now, they might be operated by a private subsidiary in Live Nation, but they are owned by the taxpayers. And in the case of Wilmington, because this is a new venue, Live Oak Bank Pavilion has only been open a couple of years. This is a venue that cost around $35 million that the city invested. There was $20 million from a parks bond, which is debt that the city borrowed. It was on the ballot. $20 million from the park bond and $11 million from the general fund of the city of Wilmington to construct this venue, which is right downtown. If you've never been, it is right in downtown Wilmington, right on the Cape Fear River. Live Nation contributed potentially upwards of $4 million towards the venue. So the city invests more than $30 million constructing the venue. Live Nation chips in anywhere between $2 and $4 million, according to reporting, and they get to run the venue exclusively. And for anybody that is an enjoyer of live music, of which I find myself in that category, in that camp, you have seen in recent years how live music performances have become completely unaffordable. They have become so expensive to attend, and in large part, it's because of Live Nation's subsidiary, Ticketmaster, which the way that this process works out, and the reason why I believe that a jury found that Live Nation Entertainment is a monopoly is because of what they do with these venues. They come in the case of the two venues that we're talking about, the one in Raleigh, the one in Wilmington, they come in, they bid out to the city. They are successful in getting the contract to operate the music venue. You have the backing of Live Nation, who of course has all of these deals with all of these different musicians and performers and acts. And so you get this major company in here to operate the venue, which again, I makes sense, right? I understand. I don't want government operating a music venue. But you get this company that comes in, they essentially cannibalize the venue, they take it over, they require any performance that's going to go through there to use their Ticketmaster ticketing system. Everybody at some point or another has used Ticketmaster, and it has created this situation where the prices for tickets for events has skyrocketed and ballooned. And it's not because the performers are getting rich on these events. You can go to Ticketmaster's website, you can go to Live Nation's website and look at any show that is coming to a Live Nation-owned venue, and you will see in some cases, and actually I argue most cases, that the service and ticketing fee charged by Ticketmaster is sometimes more than the ticket itself. You will find situations where you'll be spending, let's call it $60 per ticket to go see somebody, right? $60. So $120 for 2 tickets. Then you will see per ticket, there is a $30 service fee or a $28 service fee or $26 service fee per ticket. So you add that up, you literally could have bought another ticket if there wasn't this exorbitant fee associated with it. And that is what is going on at these Live Nation Ticketmaster venues all over the United States. It has destroyed live music. Governments like the city of Wilmington, the city of Raleigh have essentially given away their concert venue to Live Nation, and it has completely destroyed the entire atmosphere. And for what? So that Live Nation can pad their pockets. It is a miserable situation, and is something that should have happened a very, very long time ago. Reading from a couple of the news reports out of this, Ticketmaster owner Live Nation has maintained an illegal monopoly over live events and ticketing markets, according to a bombshell verdict announced in Manhattan federal court on Wednesday. The jurors in this case, who deliberated for 4 days, determined that Live Nation and its CEO illegally leveraged its ownership of major concert venues to benefit its own tour promotion business, with the jury finding that concert goers paid an extra $1.72 per ticket as a direct result of Live Nation's anti-competitive practices. U.S. District Judge Oren Sharbermain will decide on what penalties Live Nation will need to pay as a result of the verdict, as well as appropriate remedies, which could include, and this is where the story gets really interesting, a potential breakup of the business, which I would argue needs to happen. It is absolutely, just to the naked eye, very clear and obvious that Live Nation is operating a monopoly. It's as clear as day. Live Nation comes into these venues. Live Nation, of course, brings the musical performance and tells said musical performance, well, you have to use Ticketmaster if you want to play at this venue and sell tickets. That is, by definition, a monopoly. They have completely taken over the industry. And for these musical acts, what is their alternative? What is their option? Because Live Nation owns so many venues, operates so many venues, that if you refuse to work with Live Nation, you're just not going to get to play anywhere. So it hurts the musician and it hurts the customers. And so this is a bombshell decision out of the federal court system in Manhattan. And I think some of the lingering long-term effects are going to probably be pretty significant. So back to some of the details on this major suit out of New York City, Manhattan, where you had a bunch of attorney generals in a bunch of states going after Live Nation Entertainment and Ticketmaster for their, what they claimed in their original suit, operating an illegal monopoly. And just to lay out exactly how this plays out. Reading, this is from the New York Post. The ruling appeared to cap years of fan and artist complaints, right? So this is multi-pronged and faceted, as I noted. Right? You've got both sides on this. You've got the fans that are livid that they can't afford to go see even smaller musical performances because it's so expensive because of Ticketmaster and Live Nation's absurd fees. Artists don't really have a choice, right? Because Ticketmaster and Live Nation own everything. So they have very little exposure to the live music market unless they work with Live Nation. Everybody is ticked off except, of course, for Live Nation and Ticketmaster, who are getting rich. And just to show you and illustrate the level of control, Live Nation controls 42 of the top 50 amphitheater venues in the United States. That's what Live Nation either owns outright or controls. And in the controlling part, I'm talking about the venue in Raleigh, Walnut Creek, and then in Wilmington, Live Oak Bank Pavilion. They don't own them. They're owned by the cities, but they have the contract to operate or control said venue. 42 out of the top 50 amphitheaters. And for those, any event that goes on there, you have to use Ticketmaster to sell the tickets. Artists have long accused Live Nation of forcing them to work with them if they wanted to play at these venues. And fans raged at high concert prices they blamed on Ticketmaster's market control. Now, it was interesting, and this is not the first time I've covered this. I remember talking about this years ago with some other allegations that were made. This is not the first time that this conversation has taken place. Grunge, very popular grunge band Pearl Jam, back in the mid-1990s, accused Ticketmaster of punishing the Grunge Act for its criticism in 1994. So this is something that's been going on for 30 years now, that these musical performers, these musical acts, these bands, these singers have been very frustrated with the process. But again, what are they left with? If you refuse to work with Live Nation as a band, what are you supposed to do? You can't go to these venues. Live Nation owns and controls them. If you want to go there, you got to work with them. You got to get booked through Live Nation and use all of their PR, all of their marketing. Can't do any of that stuff yourself. And you've got to sell tickets through Ticketmaster. And so it creates this really miserable situation in the live music space where fans get frustrated that they want to go see, a band or see an act, and it's too expensive. It's cost prohibitive to do it. They get ticked off at the performers. They get ticked off at the bands that the tickets are so expensive. The bands come out and say, guys, this is not us. We set the ticket price, but we can't control that. Ticketmaster is charging a $30 processing or $30 ticketing fee for each ticket. We have no control over that whatsoever. And so you've got a situation where the fans, in some cases, if they're not, well in tuned on as to what's going on, they get ticked off at the band or the music act, and it's not their fault. It's Ticketmaster and Live Nation that have created this situation. The jury's decision followed a 6-week trial that proceeded to court even as President Donald Trump's Justice Department struck a controversial settlement with the entertainment giant. A coalition of 33 states, including New York and California, as well as North Carolina, opted to continue the case. Lawmakers have sought for years to rein in on Live Nation, which presided over the infamous ticket fiasco for Taylor Swift's Eras Tour back in 2022. That is when it canceled a general public sale of Swift tickets after seeing, quote, historically unprecedented demand at its pre-sale events, prompting a lawsuit from disputed fans who allege that Ticketmaster tactfully encourages scalpers. This is another major part of the story. So follow me through on this, and I know this is it's a little bit confusing. You buy a ticket to go. You're the first buyer of a ticket. You go through Ticketmaster to buy this ticket. Let's say you pay let me make sure I write some of this down so we can make sure that we've got our math correct here. You spend $50 on the ticket. That is the admission to the event. On top of that $50, you've got a $20 processing fee. So doing the quick math on that, that leaves you at $70 a ticket for event, using nice, even, round numbers. $70 to attend said event. Something comes up. You now have to go out of town on a work trip when you were supposed to go see said musical act. Well, of course, you are going to want to try and resell that ticket. Because that ticket was purchased through Ticketmaster, you are essentially locked down to selling that ticket through Ticketmaster. So you go forward and you say, oh, well, I'm not trying to scalp, but I want to get my money back. So I spent $70 on the ticket. I'm going to list it at resale at $70. Somebody else comes along and wants to buy your ticket. This is, again, a $50 ticket that you are, with fees you spent $70 on, you are now selling for $70. So Joe Schmo comes along to try and buy your resale ticket. He is interested in going to the show. You can't make it because of a previous engagement. You got to travel out of town for work. So you list the ticket for $70 on Ticketmaster's exchange. Then somebody else comes along to buy said ticket, and they also pay a $20 processing fee. So it is the same physical $50 ticket that has had a $20 fee added on top of it the first time it was purchased. It is now in the resale market for $70 because you obviously want to make your money back. You don't want to take a loss on the ticket. Somebody else comes by, buys it. They spend $70, included your $20 process fee, and then that new buyer is charged an additional service fee on the ticket. So we are now up to $90 for said ticket. This was a $50 ticket. $50 was the price for admission. And you now have $40 worth of fees on said ticket. That is the situation that has been created by Live Nation and by Ticketmaster. It is absolutely a monopoly, and it is absolutely anti-competitive. This is absurd. You're spending almost more on processing fees than you are on the base ticket. And that is the real situation that has been bumming out concert goers for years. If you are not getting pre-sale tickets or buying them directly from Ticketmaster, the third-party market is insanely expensive because Ticketmaster puts their hand in the pot every single time there's a transaction. And so you can imagine for a very sought-after show where tickets are sometimes sold maybe 3 times. Original buyer, resell, especially as prices continue to skyrocket. You are looking at hundreds of dollars per ticket in fees that Ticketmaster did nothing for. They're just collecting this service fee each and every time that ticket goes through their system. It has ruined live music across the United States. It has made it so expensive to go and see anybody. We're not, the Taylor Swift story obviously got a lot of attention because she's arguably the most popular performer right now. But this is even small and mid-size acts. This same nonsense, this same garbage is going on. I'll have some additional details on this major decision out of a Manhattan court coming up here in just a couple of minutes. But before that, I want to tell you about the Law Group here in Wilmington and thank them for their continued support of the Nick Craig Show, and want to remind you that when legal challenges arise, make sure you put your trust in the Law Group right here in Wilmington. Since 2003, their experienced attorneys have provided high-quality, affordable legal services across Eastern North Carolina. Whether you're facing a divorce, navigating a real estate transaction, or maybe you're in a position where you need a strong defense, if so, the Law Group has your back. Their dedicated team ensures your questions are answered and issues are resolved as quickly as possible. They're located in downtown Wilmington and just a phone call away at 910-251-6088, or you can visit them online at lawgroupnc.com. That's 910-251-6088 or online lawgroupnc.com. It's the Law Group, experience and dedication you can rely on. We appreciate Melissa Gott and the amazing team over at the Law Group for their continued support of the Nick Craig Show. So, question to you as we hit a break here. Have you cut back on the amount of live performances that you've been going to, the amount of bands and concerts that you've been seeing because of some of these exorbitant ticket prices? Plus your thoughts on this lawsuit and this jury verdict coming up here as the Nick Craig Show rolls on, streaming live this morning, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook, and also available 24/7 wherever you get your podcasts. And a good Thursday to you. Welcome back to the Nick Craig Show. Thanks for spending some time with us today as we talk about a major decision out of a courtroom in Midtown Manhattan, where Live Nation Entertainment has been ruled a monopoly by a jury after, I believe it was 5 days of a deliberation there. The jury decided that, in fact, Live Nation and its subsidiary Ticketmaster were, in fact, operating as a monopoly. And I just kind of went over some of the details and recounted some of the big-time issues that this has caused concert goers across the United States, as they have, of course, most people, I'd say, I think it's fair to say, enjoy live entertainment. I mean, you like to go and see a band, a concert. I mean, I think that is a very common thing that people like to do. And because of this agreement, obviously, with Live Nation and Ticketmaster, its subsidiary, those companies combined have completely boxed out, I would argue, the vast majority of people from attending concerts. And it is a completely miserable situation. And I just highlighted some of the issues as it relates to the resale market. And that is really where things, I think, get pretty bad. For example, I'm looking at an event, as I mentioned, 2 venues here in North Carolina owned by cities. You've got Walnut Creek in Raleigh, Live Oak Bank Pavilion in Wilmington. They are owned by the city of Raleigh and the city of Wilmington, respectively. And Live Nation operates these venues, and this is what I'm talking about. I just pulled up a show that is coming to Wilmington in May. Earth, Wind, and Fire. Everybody knows Earth, Wind, and Fire. They are playing at Wilmington. The tickets are $36 a piece for lawn seats. Not bad at all. But there is a $14 service charge per ticket. So you are looking at $107 to attend an event that is $36 a ticket. So as I was mentioning before, if I purchase these tickets right now for $107 for Sunday, May the 17th, and something happens and I can't go, or I just don't feel like going, and I want to resell these tickets, those service fees of $28 are going to be passed on to the next person and the next person and the next person. And so it creates this marketplace where tickets become so incredibly expensive very quickly. And one of the things that came out of this lawsuit, which I found interesting as I was reading through some of the details on it, is that Live Nation and Ticketmaster have essentially turned a blind eye to bots buying tickets. So you've got groups of people that will, and not even people, but these bot farms, these computers that will go out and purchase these tickets when they get up for sale originally. And so they'll purchase those tickets as bots. They have no intention of attending. They intend to resell them. But for Ticketmaster, why would they care? Right? Because they're getting a service fee on the original ticket and they're getting a service fee on the resale and every resale that goes on, which is free money for them, right? They're doing no additional work whatsoever besides providing the marketplace for the ticket to be resold. And so for them, it is a very lucrative business to have these scalpers buy up these tickets because they're getting filthy rich on the resale. According to the article over at the New York Post, court records that surfaced during the trial included Slack messages, which included Live Nation employees admitting to turning a blind eye when brokers were buying up large blocks of tickets, saying, quote, "Normally, I'd look the other way." In other Slack messages from 2021 to 2023 that went viral, employee Ben Baker and fellow Live Nation executive Jeff Weinhold gloated about charging massive fees on ticket purchases at Live Nation venues, saying, and I quote, "These people are so stupid. I almost feel bad for taking advantage of them," according to the court records. So it's not just me that feels this way. It's not just you who feels this way. Live Nation and Live Nation Entertainment knew what they were doing, admitted they knew what they were doing, and said that they almost felt bad for taking advantage of the people, calling them so stupid. Really. But I'm supposed to believe Live Nation's thought in all of this that they didn't do anything wrong, that there's no issues here, that just need to turn a blind eye and look the other way. There's nothing going on here. The people are so stupid. And I almost feel bad for taking advantage of them. As I mentioned earlier, under the DOJ settlement, which was separate from this lawsuit, Live Nation agreed to cap its service fees at amphitheaters at 15%, open up booking at 13 amphitheaters to competitors, and place a 4-year limit on exclusivity deals between Ticketmaster and specific venues. They've also created a $280 million fund to settle state claims. As the New York Post reported, critics allege that the settlement amounted to a slap on the wrist that wouldn't help lower ticket prices, with individuals criticizing the federal government for their settlement with Ticketmaster. But as we're talking about now, there was a separate legal challenge that included a bunch of states, including North Carolina, under Attorney General Jeff Jackson, that continued to pursue this suit even after the DOJ settlement. With one source telling the New York Post, without a breakup of Live Nation and Ticketmaster, there isn't going to be a meaningful difference in ticket prices. The judge in this case expressed outrage over the settlement between the feds and Live Nation, which was announced after the trial had already begun and was so abrupt that even the lead DOJ attorney said he didn't learn the details until around the same time that the court was informed. And so you've got a couple of different things going on with this situation. You've got, of course, the federal side of this, the settlement with the DOJ. Now you've got this separate lawsuit that a jury just ruled on this week as it relates to the states going after Ticketmaster and going after Live Nation for their very anti-competitive practices, their monopolistic practices. It is a fascinating discussion that takes place. Live Nation continues to insist that it is not a monopoly, saying, quote, that artists, sport teams, and venues decide pricing and ticketing practices, as a company lawyer insisted its size was simply a function of excellence and effort. That is insane. I mean, I just read through the internal messages. And to Live Nation's point, venues and artists, they do in fact decide the prices, as I just mentioned, right? This Earth, Wind, and Fire event that is coming to Live Oak Bank Pavilion. Earth, Wind, and Fire determined $36 was the cost for a lawn seat. What Earth, Wind, and Fire did not decide is that Live Nation was going to charge $14 per ticket as a service fee. That does not include tax that is also on top of that. Now, I'm not going to get into an argument over tax, but that's that. So $36 tickets, two $36 tickets, when it's all said and done, it is in your car, works out to $107. And Live Nation admits in private Slack messages that became part of the public court record during discovery that they knew what they were doing. They claimed that people were stupid for, I guess, buying these tickets, which of course pays their salary, so kind of ridiculous there. Claimed that people are stupid and said they sort of and almost felt bad for individuals that were buying these tickets. Ticketmaster was established in 1976 and merged with Live Nation back in 2010. There was some scrutiny on that under the Obama administration, but the Federal Trade Commission allowed it to go through, with the company now controlling 86% of the market for concerts and 73% of the overall market when sports events are included. So almost exactly 86% of the music market and 73% of the overall live event market, which would include, of course, football games, baseball games, everything like that. They are a huge player in the industry. They have not acted appropriately in my vantage point, and according to a jury in Manhattan, they have also not acted appropriately there. And so now we are approaching a situation in which there is a possibility, and I don't know what the odds are on it, but there is a possibility that Live Nation and Ticketmaster are broken up. And I think that absolutely needs to happen. Absolutely. Because we have seen, and I just kind of went through some of the details that have completely ruined this industry. And obviously, it's not the federal government's decision to determine whether an industry is good or not, but it is absolutely their decision to decide when somebody is operating as an illegal monopoly, which it is obvious that that is how Live Nation and Ticketmaster have been operating. So in closing out this conversation, this major jury verdict in New York City yesterday against Live Nation Entertainment, its subsidiary Ticketmaster, the jury made it abundantly clear in its decision, yeah, you guys are absolutely operating as a monopoly. And as I was just mentioning a couple of minutes ago, it is going to be absolutely fascinating to see how this continues to play out. What exactly happens here? Because it will be the judge in some case, in this case, that will get to decide what exactly happens. Does he order that this major situation be broken up? Does he argue and does the judge go forward with actually breaking up this monopoly? I mean, we've seen this in the past. Probably the greatest example is AT&T and breaking up AT&T into all of these smaller phone systems throughout the United States. That, of course, happened years and years and years ago. We've seen things like this before, and with the amount of penetration, with the amount of control that Live Nation has on these venues and this scene across the country, it seems logical to me that that would be the next step, that this major business is broken up. Now, let me be clear, because I've made this point in recent days. I am a capitalist. I don't have a problem. There's a comment in our chat that the CEO of Ticketmaster or of Live Nation made $139 million. I don't have a problem with him making $139 million at all. I mean, if that is what the marketplace believes is fair to pay him as a salary, then I hope he earns every single dollar that he possibly can. I don't have an issue with exorbitant salaries for CEOs. What I do have a problem with is when a company like Live Nation is creating a monopoly, which is exactly what they were doing. They were forcing the performers, the musicians, the artists, the band, to use Live Nation and use Ticketmaster for essentially all of their shows, unless they wanted to play a bunch of small town venues, which is not practical for some of these larger acts, these larger performers, boxing them out of 80 some odd percent of music venues in the United States. And then for the venues themselves, especially the ones that are owned by cities and towns and counties, that is a huge major problem as well, right? I talked about Live Oak Bank Pavilion in Wilmington at the beginning of the show. The city, aka the taxpayers, invested $31 million into this venue. Live Nation chipped in $4 million. That was it. And now they are here at Live Oak Bank Pavilion running the entire show, controlling what can be done at the venue, holding the venue very, very close to their chest. They don't own it. The taxpayer owns it. The city of Wilmington owns it. Same situation up in Raleigh. I'll note that Walnut Creek is a much older venue. The reason I'm talking about Live Oak Bank Pavilion is because it's new. It just opened a couple of years ago, back in 2021, after being delayed for years and years and years, and the cost going way above what it was originally supposed to be. And so it's a recent example of what has been created. It has destroyed competition in the marketplace. It has made it so incredibly unaffordable to attend any sort of live music event across the United States, and so that Live Nation can pad their own pockets. Which again, I'm fine with a business making money. That's not the gripe. That's not the issue. I'm not an anti-capitalist guy. I'm not an eat the rich guy at all. But I do have a problem when you are operating an illegal monopoly and destroying something that I like to do, which is go out and see live music. That is a major problem for me. And it should be a major problem for you. And nobody, I don't know a single person that has ever had something nice to say about Ticketmaster or Live Nation. I mean, anybody I've ever talked to has said, I've stopped going, or I don't like going, or I won't be going anymore because of the nonsense. And then, of course, you get to these venues. Now, this is me just griping personally, but I'm just going to lay it out here. You go to these venues, you spend $100+ a ticket when tickets should be anywhere between $50 or $60. But once you get all the fees in there, you spend $100 to get into this venue. Then you're offered a beer for $18, a lukewarm hot dog for $12. It's a miserable situation. Now, $200 in and out of a show to have a couple of beers and something to eat. All of that operated and controlled by Live Nation because, again, with their venues, they're the ones selling the tickets. They're the ones selling the food. They're the ones selling the beer and the alcohol. They own the entire process. That's why it's a monopoly. And I believe that's why, in large part, why a jury ruled the way that it did. They control every facet of it and allow absolutely no competition whatsoever. Now, if they own the venue outright, they can do, from my vantage point, they should be able to do pretty much whatever they want. But they don't own every single venue in which they operate. And they have completely taken these venues over. They're like a group of, a swarm of locusts going into this situation. It's just created an absolute mess. And so it's miserable. And I've told people this privately before. I don't know if I've talked about it publicly before. I'm never going to go back to another Live Nation Ticketmaster venue. I'm just not. I've had nothing but awful experiences every time I've gone. I've paid through the nose to go and see shows and acts before. And as much as I love live music, I'm not going to do it. I'm not paying $30 worth of ticket fees to walk into a show, to have a miserable experience at a venue, to not be able to buy anything while I'm there because I'm already tapped out, having spent hundreds of dollars on the tickets. It's just miserable. And so the consumers in the United States have found themselves very frustrated with this situation. No surprise whatsoever. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, the artists are not happy about it either. But again, going back to the monopoly standpoint, they really have no option because Live Nation owns and or operates all of these venues. I mentioned 42 out of the 50 largest amphitheaters in the United States. So if you are a middle or large size act, You have no option but to work with Live Nation because there's literally nowhere else to perform, literally nowhere else to play that will seat the audience or the guests that you want to attend, the concert goers. It's a mess. And so I am very interested to see what's going to go on here. Obviously, Live Nation is going to appeal said decision. I don't think that should be a surprise for anybody to hear. That process, I mean, it could take a significant amount of time. It's not immediately clear how long that process will take. I'm sure that that's exactly what they'll do. And then after that process goes forth, presumably they'd be unsuccessful in an appeal. But if they aren't, if they are not successful in that appeal, then we go to the next stage of, all right, what is the penalty here? Obviously, there's going to be hundreds of millions, potentially billions of dollars worth of fines assessed to Ticketmaster and Live Nation. And for me, the thing that would really break this case open and really solidify this more than anything else is that Live Nation and Ticketmaster need to be broken up. You should be able, as a musician, to perform at a Live Nation-owned venue or a Live Nation-operated venue and use somebody else for ticketing, whether it's StubHub or Vivid Seats or maybe something that you've got yourself as a performer. And same thing for the consumers. They should be able to attend events at these venues and not have to go through the just ringer that is the Live Nation Entertainment gambit, where they control every piece of the equation, from bringing the band there in the first place, to the ticketing, to the food and beverage, the renting chair. I mean, the entire thing controlled by them. It has, for me, ruined live music across the United States. It has made it so cost prohibitive to even go. It is hurting the bands and the performers. It's just hurting everybody. The only winner in all of this has been this now illegal monopoly that is known as Live Nation Entertainment. So we'll keep an eye on this out of New York City and see if there is a breakup that is ordered by the courts. And as it is relevant, we'll bring you updates right here on the Nick Craig Show. Checking out some other news that we are following this morning, the North Carolina legislature has announced its official calendar for the 2026 long session. There is a lot on the agenda. Here is the official calendar published yesterday by House Speaker Destin Hall. It shows 27 voting days that are planned within the General Assembly starting next week, next Tuesday, April the 21st. A couple of voting days in April, the 21st, 22nd, 28th, and 29th. Pretty much the entire month of May, minus that last week, will have the voting days and possible voting days. The entire month of June, every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday in June, essentially, a live, the ability for votes to take place. And then a couple of days in July, the 1st and 2nd of July, as lawmakers look to be out of Raleigh and back on the campaign trail by July the 4th. There are still a lot of major topics of discussions within Raleigh. There are, I believe, 8 veto overrides that are currently sitting in the North Carolina House. They need a supermajority to override those vetoes. That's already been done in the Senate. They include things like Senate Bill 50, that's constitutional carry. There are a couple of DEI-related bills that are in the legislature as well that we are waiting to see some movement on. So that's obviously a major priority. The state is still without a budget. The new fiscal year started July 1st of 2025. This is going to be a major pain point for Republicans running for re-election if they cannot get a budget done and provide things like teacher raises and other raises for state employees and additional funding for things like Helene relief and Helene cleanup in Western North Carolina. So there is a lot on this agenda. 27 days of voting planned, 4 additional days where votes are possible. That brings us, to 30 voting days within this short session here in the months of April, May, June, and just the first 2 days in July. So as we transition into that, I'll be keeping a very close eye on the legislature, the movement on a variety, a litany of different issues. We'll bring you the details right here on the Nick Craig Show. Well, that's going to do it for a Thursday morning. Thanks for spending some time here, and thanks to the Law Group for their continued support. Melissa Gott and her team. Visit them online, lawgroupnc.com, or give them a call, 910-251-6088. The Nick Craig Show streams live weekday mornings, 7 a.m., YouTube, Rumble, X, Facebook. It's also available 24/7 in your favorite podcast app, and is heard weeknights, 9 to 10 p.m. on WBT Radio in Charlotte. Enjoy your Thursday. We're back tomorrow morning right here on The Nick Craig Show.